I want to welcome to the program somebody I've known for a number of years, did just exceptional work when he was a member of Congress. I think I first met him out in California, actually. But you know him from a lot of different things, probably most significantly his work on the House Intel Committee to debunk all of the Russiagate insanity. Devin Nunes, welcome to the program.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Listen. I wasn't sure I was going to see you because I'm only on this for one reason and one reason only. I want to know who the hell is comfortably smug.
Yeah,
well, I thought I was going to see him today.
You know, he takes his appearance. He takes his appearance very, very carefully, right? I mean, this is a guy who stays under. I mean, you as an Intel guy, you got to appreciate that.
Well, is it possible that comfortably smug, maybe a he, maybe a she, maybe Q?
Yeah,
one of those.
I feel like we should ask all those.
Get you banned. My goal during this podcast is to get you banned from all other social media sites. So comfortably smug has to come to True Social because you're gonna get banned because your actual comfortably smug is Q.
Now I understand your motive. This makes all the sense in the world. It's that kind of 3D chess that's gotten you to where you are in life, Mr. Nunes.
No, thanks though. In all seriousness, I forgot about that time you came out to my district, and that was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
I appreciate those. That was a long time ago.
It was probably 10 plus years ago, but it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot in the process. I haven't spent a ton of time in Central California, so it was good. I got a little piece of it. But
the lefties call it drive-through country. As you know, it's the land of fruits and nuts, but like the real ones, like actual fruits and nuts, not like metaphorically.
It should be a bumper sticker. That's fantastic. Let me start with this because obviously in the headlines with last week's raid of Mar-a-Lago, there was a lot of us that immediately were snapped back to reminders of where we were for 4 years under Donald Trump and the intelligence community, the FBI, and DOJ persecuting an incredible number of untruths. And I really think of it, without you as the chair of the House Intel Committee, I'm not sure we would have gotten to where we needed to go in terms of uncovering the depth and the breadth of the effort to try to undermine President Trump by those agencies.
Yeah, and what I would say, too, that people have to remember, I'd also say Senator Grassley did a hell of a job early on. So Senator Grassley came to see me early on in 2017. And, I had basically come out at that time early. I'd come out right away and said, look, I don't see anything here. There's no evidence of Trump or Republicans colluding with Russians. And the reason that I knew that is because I had been the only one who gave a damn about Russia and Putin for like 4 years straight.
Right.
And the irony of this thing was that in early 2016, the spring of 16, I was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and I had enough of Putin just having his way with the United States. He was making our intelligence agencies look like morons, and the Obama administration looked like morons. So I actually went out on when I used to do CNN and some of those other stations, and thank God I had done that. I went out and said, look, this is the largest intelligence failure since 9/11, our inability to understand Putin's plans and intentions. So I had spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, I may even have received, awards from Eastern European countries. Because for a long time, I was saying things like, look, NATO's not paying their fair share. I mean, some of the things that Trump had said when he first got in. Why on earth would you guys buy all your natural gas from Russia? And this is total insanity. And had been, to the stands, to Kazakhstan, to Azerbaijan, to, all that area and part of my duties. So you can imagine what happens in late 2016. We get an initial briefing after the election that says, hey, nothing normal. Putin's a thug. He did his thuggish things. And then we go home for Thanksgiving. And then after Thanksgiving, all of a sudden there's this strange Senate briefing that, of course, leaks to the usual suspects in Washington, the usual outlets. And they write a story about that, Senate was just briefed on ties of Trump to Russia. And I'm like, what? And Russians, getting into the election. I said, what the hell is this? My phone's ringing off the hook. It was like the week after Thanksgiving. I don't know what the hell's going on. I said, there's no way this is possible. I go back. I remember, as you probably remember from your days working in, at those, I'm not sure how many of the Intel briefings that you received, but I called all the appropriate people. I said, okay, where are the documents? What do we got? Is there something going on here? No, there's nothing. And there was nothing. There was basically the Steele dossier, and then Obama orders that bogus intelligence report that then after the first of the year, we all come in, we get briefed on, and they show us this dossier. And I looked at that dossier and I said, what in the hell is this? I mean, I've been reading at that point, over a decade of reading intelligence reports. When I came to Congress, it was right when we went into Iraq. We had been in Afghanistan. So you can imagine all that time. And I quickly looked at this. There was nobody in their possible right mind could read that and say, this is an intelligence type document. Yet everybody in the fake news was saying it. The Democrats in the House were saying it. The Republican leadership, wasn't. And I just went out there and said, look, this is all bullshit.
Yeah,
and
which is so amazing, right? Because up to that point, the narrative, the mainstream media narrative of you is like, well, this is like, he's clearly a conservative, but he's one of the more thoughtful leaders in Congress, and he does his homework. He knows, more about his line of work than almost anybody else. And then, like, with one sentence, all of a sudden, you're portrayed as the kook.
Right. And that's when Chuck Grassley, and, just to kind of close this up, is that Grassley came to visit me and said, hey, what do you have? And then that's when we started comparing notes. And I think it was, had it not been for Senator Grassley, his great team and the work they did, I think it would have been tough for us to get through. And I only say that just because I think it's fair to make sure that, the people that did really good work in those days get the credit.
No, it's very generous of you, but it's absolutely true. The two of you worked hand in glove in your committees to try to uncover a lot of this stuff. I mean, the most interesting part about the beginning of this that you're talking about is that up to that point, the intel committees had basically never been used to sort of run out front of an administration to try to allege things that were happening, right? Intel had always been, for better or worse, there was obviously differences with the Iraq War and all kinds of different things where people had different interpretations, but never had sort of granular, shitty research basically been used as an intel product to outrun all of the narratives, go straight to the newspaper. And now you're stuck in the position where you have to basically speak truth with nothing but lies surrounded.
Yeah, and I think if you look back in those time periods, I think it's a good analogy or comparison. The Iraq War, clearly there were differences of opinion, real differences of opinion. Intelligence, some people on Intel got it right, some got it wrong, but there were real documents, there was real information, there was something really to argue over. And I came on to the committee shortly, kind of after that time period. And I remember, at that time, the members who had kind of been there, the older members who had been there, said, yeah, that was some tough times, but we generally, you don't hear from us, unless there's a terrorist attack. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I like to tell people, I had the very best job in the world when I first became chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. You didn't hear from us. We did work. It was bipartisan. Right. There was a lot of rewarding work too, by the way. I mean, you would go, overseas to visit. You'd hear directly from either our allies, our adversaries, maybe in between, people on the ground. And then you would come back and you'd have instant impact. So in that time period, I went from the best job in the world to, in 2017, the worst job in the world, because all of a sudden, I was out there saying, look, this didn't happen. And then, I got smeared, attacked, and it never stopped.
Which has got to be it's got to be a weird feeling for somebody like you. Again, spent your entire congressional career regarded as an extremely serious, thoughtful member of Congress. And then in one short time frame, all of a sudden you're looped in as the craziest guy in all the mainstream media outlets. And I'm thinking like, obviously I had a lot of reservations about the narrative, but all you do is read what's out there. And then when I saw you so strongly out there, I thought, well, that's not Devin. Devin Nunes is not a crazy person, right? But it had to feel like you were on an island.
Well, look, I think had it not been for my long career, being a serious member of Congress, very supportive always of the cause, there's not one Republican broke from me in the House, right? Not one. And almost the entire Senate. I think they all said, and they must have said it even to the fake news guys, to say, look, if Devin Nunes is saying this, there's got to be some truth to it. And I would have to have meetings with a lot of these members, but it didn't take long. After a couple months, then you had the Mueller investigation that quickly all fell apart. And essentially that's it had already started for a while, but it was really kind of the earthquake in 2017 that kind of separated the two realities. You either live in the Democrat, DC, New York, Beltway reality, you read New York Times, Post, all of that, you take it as gospel, or you read kind of center-right media and investigative reporters, and those are the worlds that people live in. Mm-hmm. And I think when you don't live in those worlds now, you get crossways, right? So, and I think a lot of my former colleagues are starting to figure what I figured out in 17 was that I just cut them all off. I'm sure I'm the first member of Congress, at least in modern history. I cut off all the fake news, and I told them very pointedly, look, you've got 10 stories here. Take them down, apologize. Yep. And they wouldn't do it. So I said, well, I'm done. I'm out. Right. So I'm out. I don't talk to them. I never talk to them. I quit. And now I quit. I would only talk to ones that wrote real news. Yeah. I even had a couple center-right operations wrote some fake news, and I had to go to them and say, look, I'm cutting you off unless you take this down or change it. And of course, it ended up happening. But it's been and look, it's not partly. It is the reason why I left. I just see that the most important issue here at the highest level is our inability to communicate. So it's one thing to have fake news versus not fake news. It's another thing when you run it through, into these phones through social media. And I caught Twitter shadow banning me. I caught YouTube doing the same thing. And then and then of course the 2020 election happens. They ban, they had already started banning people from other platforms. So in 2020, a lot of people I don't think know this, but I went out and got on Parler and got on Rumble. I was the first congressman to do so, largely because I knew the other places were useless for me to be. So when they banned President Trump and millions of other Americans, and the censoring got worse and worse, that's when I said, when President Trump called and said, look, I'm creating this company, a lot about this. And I said, gosh, I've been around the country. I know this is the most important issue at the highest level. And that's why, I left Congress. It wasn't, I like to say, I didn't need a new job. President Trump didn't need a new company, but the American people have to have the internet open, and we've got to get our voices back. And I think that during this last week, it kind of proved that. It proved that it was the only way that people could circulate information freely over the internet, largely on Truth Social, hear from President Trump, hear from others, and not be censored. All during a week, surprisingly, where Twitter has just said that they're going to be, deciding, before the election what's fake or not. So look,
amazing, and they have a real great track record at that, don't they?
Right. Hey, and look, there's so many people that you'd be surprised, like how many. Like I was only partly joking of you getting kicked off of Twitter. Or not you, but whoever comfortably smug it is getting kicked off, because they are methodically kicking off people that have that may not be major players or not household names, but they're real investigative reporters. Mm-hmm. And just last week, a Real Clear Politics reporter got kicked off.
It's wild.
And it continues to happen.
You can tell that this is a mission for you, for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is you were also on the Ways and Means Committee, probably slated to be chairman, right? And of all the chairmanships in Congress, probably the biggest deal out of them all. You could have had that, and you chose to leave Congress and do what you're doing. You must be totally committed at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was that was probably the only thing that I looked at and said, gosh, this is, I'm in this great position. I really like all those issues. But the fact of the matter is I had wrote a little pamphlet, a little book on this in 2020. This was before the Hunter Biden laptop from hell. And it was basically telling people about, look, here's fake news. Here's how it's being, here's how people are being shadow banned. And it was written in July, actually, of 2020. And that was before all this other bad stuff happened. So then in 21, I'm running around the country, going to, speaking all over the place, saying this is the most important issue. We have to have a social media company to get back up and going. And, so when you all of a sudden are poised with, okay, here it is. If you say it's the number one issue, you could come and run this company. What the hell was I going to say? And honestly, I mean, look, it's just a lot of fun, and I think after it's fun to create something new. I already know how this is going to end because I watched Parler and I watched Rumble take off. So I know what's going to happen here. It's exactly what is happening now. We're getting millions of Americans, and the fake news can't help themselves. These social media companies can't help themselves. So we're just going to continue to grow. And look, our goal really is we don't want to be just news and information and political. And to some degree, we're getting some of that because we've got all these great, funny meme makers that got kicked off the other platforms. So we are a place where social media is fun again. But we have an opportunity to create something where you take the best of TikTok, the best of Instagram, the best of Facebook, the best of Twitter, you put it into one. That's what we're building here. It's going to take us a while. We're only about halfway through kind of our major feature set build out. And we're also not even fully launched yet because even though we're on the Google Play Store for pre-order, they haven't yet approved our app. So, we're waiting for that. So imagine, that's going to add millions of more people to already a platform that most people they've been on the platform for a few months and they're active and they're creative. They're surpassing what they already had on these other platforms, sometimes been on these other platforms for years. So we know it's going to work. And look, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, and I got to imagine with the news that Elon and the Twitter sale looks like it's not going through, that can't hurt your efforts either.
Well, you know what we said at the time is kind of funny. It's kind of weird how that all went down, too, because there's been a lot of fake news about that. Nobody was more supportive, ironically, of President Trump and I saying, yeah, we hope he buys it. And then there was, and I think a lot of, because we're not trying to be Twitter. Twitter is a global PR wire on the internet. It's where like celebrities and sports folks, figures and politicians go and they put a statement out and then the news grabs it and puts it on their screen. It's not a place people go to social network, right? To build groups and communities. So we've never wanted to be Twitter. A lot of people see it as that because, Donald Trump was most famous for tweets, mean tweets and that sort of thing. But that's not really the company we're trying to be. So we have a simple mission. It's to open up the internet and give the American people their voice back. And we like to say, look, we're for everybody that wants to promote free speech. So both President Trump and I were supportive of it, which is why it was kind of so weird that Elon made like kind of, some just kind of like vague kind of attacks against President Trump and True Social. We don't know why. I mean, he's welcome on the platform, and we supported him to buy Twitter because I think, like, you may not know this, but and I'm not trying to offend you at all, but like normal people aren't on Twitter.
Yeah, and you're not going to offend me.
It's just, yeah. I give the example. I went to Easter, and this was kind of when we were at the beginning of rolling out kind of the first stages of True Social, and it was my extended family. And I said, okay, hey, how many of you guys are on Twitter? Not one hand went up. I had like one uncle that was like, oh, I was on there, but as soon as Trump got kicked off, I'm out, Right. But, half of the group are on between Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, nearly the whole group of, the 80, 100 people, They were all on those platforms.
Yep. So your goal
that's where we got to be a real social networking, social media company. You've got to get to the broader market.
Yeah, a broader palette of at least participants, right? I mean, like you said, Twitter is pretty narrow. Let me ask you this, because I want to get more into Truth Social in a minute, but I also want to ask you, the Intel community, having been, you built your chops dealing with these folks on a day-to-day basis. Did you ever think that they had the capacity of being just totally political?
I mean, look, you see it throughout history in other countries and other governments. But, never did I think it would get to this level. You would have thought that what we uncovered in 17, everything that we went through in 17 and 18, with the Inspector General coming out, with the Durham appointment, you would have thought all of that would have there would have been a kind of a course change, right?
Right.
But there hasn't been. And look, we can get into this as much or little as you like, but part of the reason why is that the same cast of characters who started way back, and you'll remember these days with Fast and Furious and the gun running to targeting conservatives through the IRS, the same cast of characters that were maybe high level, but not the highest levels during the Obama-Biden administration have now been promoted. They're at the very top echelon.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, if you believe last week that the White House and people in the White House didn't know about that Mar-a-Lago was going to get raided, didn't know that Garland was going to have a press conference. You and I have been in Washington long enough, and I know all your listeners know this. That's like the biggest bunch of bullshit of all time.
Of all time.
They know that it's going to be, that they know by just the fact that they came out and said it shows you, of course they knew.
You just can't do something that is that precedent setting in an agency. I don't care if it's DOJ or if it's the Department of Commerce. If you are breaking with hundreds of years of precedent in how you handle a certain situation, you're going to run it up the flagpole.
Right.
Right.
For sure.
It's just like, blows my mind that they're like, Joe Friday out there trying to figure out where the facts are, man. But in the end.
And I also saw early on too, and you'll recognize these trends quickly. Like, I can't remember if it was Monday night. I think it was Monday night after when Trump announced the raid on Truth Social. You had a lot of people in the fake news media were putting out the White House didn't know. Well, that was giveaway already. Okay, the White House knew. Like, nobody was even asking. I didn't know. That hadn't even gone through my mind at that point. I didn't give a shit about the White House at that point, right?
right.
So,
like, nobody asked the question. They're already answering it.
And they're already answering it.
Without any investigation, right? How many times in the last 4 years could you say something and not have every reporter up your ass with a flashlight making sure you weren't lying to them? Not these guys.
Exactly. And then they repeated it on Friday before Garland came out. We have no idea what Garland's going to say. Oh my God. And look, the fake news in the Beltway there in DC, they know this too. I mean, they're all in on it. Just like we found out, through, the Russia hoax, these guys were all planted the stories. I mean, a lot of those guys ought to just hang their head down and leave and go find a new job. But this is what's happening. We're living in two different realities. And just to kind of close the question, I think the same is true for Intel. So the intelligence agencies have gotten way too big, way too cumbersome. There's way too many people in Washington, D.C. There's not enough people that are spending time abroad and doing the really difficult work that these people do. So the bureaucracies can basically become the same thing. They got to put wolf people in. They have to have one of these, one of that, one of this, all the different letters in the alphabet you have to have. They're all hanging out in D.C. They all read the Washington Post. And it's not that all of them are left wing, but it's just moving more and more and more that way.
Yeah.
So now we have a bunch of people who are not doing the most critical work sometimes. I'm not going to say that it's all that, but there's definitely a big bureaucracy that's built up, and they become political. And so when you have the people at the top and they look back, well, hell, I remember Susan Rice. She was the national security advisor. Where's she at now? Oh, wow. She's back as the domestic policy
Amazing,
advisor.
Right? They have the same 5 people doing every job.
Right. And so you're going to say, these people never go away. And you got to remember, in an intelligence or military career, a lot of these last for, 10 to 25 years. So if you're sitting in there and you're like in year 15, you're kind of in that, you're getting in the upper levels. Like you saw Susan Rice when you were a 5-year, only in 5 years. And what the hell are you going to do? You want to hit that 20, right? So even if you disagree, you're just going to say, yes, sir, and go.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot about what's going on. I mean, look, there's a lot of patriots out there, and a lot of them, that I, continue to kind of keep tabs of. They just want to keep their head down, right? They're like, they're high level folks that I've known now for 15 years or so, that I worked with, and they're still inside, and they're like, look, we're not going to say a damn thing. We don't agree with this, but we're just going to get our targets. We're going to go out and do the tough work and report it back and answer questions that the executive branch or Congress has. And it's kind of sad that people have to kind of keep their head down. And that's why I think what's interesting, if you hear what Chuck Grassley and I think Ron Johnson in the Senate, and now it seems like maybe even in the House, some whistleblowers from the FBI have come forward.
Yeah.
And that's what it's going to take if this ship is going to be turned around. That, along with, I think, what Durham's doing. Hopefully he can bring some more indictments. Some of that would have to do something, but look, this is going to a very dark place quickly. I don't know if you just saw this, but just broke. But they took President Trump's passports. I mean, this is madness. I mean, they investigated him for espionage. I mean, that's treason. And what's so crazy about that is remember, that's what they were saying in 16 and 17 and 18.
That's right.
And it was an investigation in search of a crime. And what did they say at that time? They said, oh, we're going to, well, it's obstruction of justice now. And we'd be like, wait a second, you manufactured all of this, right? You have Mueller. There's no crime there, underlying crime, because by that point, before Mueller come out, we had already proven that it was all a hoax.
Right. And
then they said, oh, no, we're going for obstruction of justice. And there were people within Mueller's team who wanted to do that, but they knew they couldn't go that far, right? They couldn't go that far with Bill Barr there and others, that had been around, but some tried to do it. And now it's like, I think they've just doubled down. I think you've got the same lunatics there. They've graduated to higher places, and they're like, Mueller should have done this. Of course he's corrupt. We got to prove it. Like, he has to be a Russian agent. Why else would you investigate President Trump on espionage? I mean, they went to a grand jury with that crazy shit.
Oh, Jesus. It's just unbelievable. Listen, before we wrap this and get to our 3 questions, I hope the very best for Truth. I hope that it's a huge success. But what I really hope beyond that, Mr. Nunes, is that when we have a Republican president, God willing, in 2025, that you can help guide some of this deconstruction of the administrative state that has become our DOJ, our FBI, and our intel, because nobody knows more about it, and frankly, nobody's been a bigger victim other than President Trump of what they have in mind for us. So please stick close to this one, will you?
Thank you. And I'll tell you, the work's going to start. If Republicans get the majority, they've got to. I mean, it's going to be like an investigation that nobody's ever seen before, that they're going to have to do.
Yeah. And
we were having this conversation, a few of us over the weekend, my former colleagues, and they're asking me what they should do, and I said, look, this has got to be such a massive investigation. I'm not even sure how you guys do it, because you got to remember, at least with the Intelligence Committee, when we ran the Russia Hoax investigation, we had kind of a very narrow field that we had to look at. We knew it was a hoax. We knew what we were dealing with. But now this has become so broad, because all this has to be looked at. Like, it's too big, really, for the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary Committee. Yeah. So I don't know what the Republicans will do, but
maybe a special, something big. Yeah, maybe a special committee of sorts. I know there's been a number of people that have talked about that. Well,
we'll get you to come back. You can go back and you can be the staff director.
I don't think so.
Then I'll put out there on Truth Social, I think Q is now the staff director of the special committee.
Here we go. You're going to cause all kinds of problems for us. This is great. All right, so I got 3 questions.
I'm still trying to just get you banned. I think if I'm just going to put out there on Truth that I found Q. She's sitting out there on Twitter somewhere.
You're doing a great job. All right, so here's the 3 questions. The first one: if you can plan your last meal on Earth, what would it be?
So, this is a good one for me, because if you're on Truth Social, or when I used to post on Instagram, so people know that I like to grill.
Yep.
But they will also know that it all depends, and all my old buddies in Washington, I know that listen to your podcast are going to know this. It depends on the wine. It depends on the wine. And they know me, like, wine is the most important part of the meal. And you basically, once you find a good wine, then you match up what you're going to eat. And that's kind of how I do this. Just sometimes, and my wife doesn't normally like that, because my wife doesn't really drink wine that much, but it kind of depends on the wine I want to drink, and then you match it up.
I'm a subscriber to this. So what's the wine? So what's the number 1 draft pick?
I always say that people ask me that all the time, because I don't know if you know, but you probably wouldn't know this, because of course the fake news never wanted to talk about this. But I was the founder of several wineries, and now I'm making a little bit of my own wine this year, and going through that process. But there's drinkable wine all over the world, and there's really only 2 categories. There's drinkable and not drinkable.
Sure.
And then there's some just elite wines, but a lot of those are very, very expensive, and a lot of them don't even exist anymore. But I'd say, look, it's hard to beat like an aged of a really good Napa Bordeaux blend are really hard to beat if they've been aged. Of course, older French wines are really good.
Yep.
But I think the actual best wine today is a 63 port.
Ooh.
So it's a little bit different wine. It's made differently.
Yeah.
But But a 1963 port wine is the best wine right now, like a Fonseca port or a Wares. They're hard to tailor. They're hard to find.
You throw a steak with that? What are we eating? We're doing the port.
Well, typically you would use that as for dessert. But there's no question. And actually the wines that I'm making now that I'm flirting with in California, I'm using Portuguese varietals that are grown in California because I think that those Portuguese varietals will grow really well on the central coast part of California. So that Paso Robles area. So that's something that I didn't have time to do when I was in Congress, really. And awesome. So it's a little fun project of mine, but I believe that, so I'm growing making those wines out there to make actually table wine, not port wine, but it's essentially kind of the same concept. So it's something awesome. That it's a passion I have for those Portuguese varietals. All
right. So I'm going to put you down for a barrel of wine, which is a great order.
Sounds good.
And so
we'll have that at the Q coming out party.
I appreciate that. All right. Second question. If you never got
the reason I'm harassing you on this, right, is because these morons in the fake news continue to write these crazy hit pieces about all this Q stuff that we're supposedly doing. It's just madness.
It's anybody right of center is Q at this point, right? All right. If you never got into politics at all, what would you do?
Oh, well, I think you already answered. I already answered.
Is it the winemaker? It's the winemaker.
I'd be making wine. Yeah.
That's an easy one.
I mean, look. Yeah, I was in farming, and that was always what I wanted to do. My grandfather grew grapes, and that's what and look, I've always been in the business, and now that I'm out, I'm trying to get a little bit more into the business, but it's really my only hobby.
Well, which
is kind of pathetic.
Smug and I are going to show up at your front door looking for a glass of whatever you got poured. So,
well, you can be guaranteed of one thing: you show up at my door. You don't have to bring the wine.
I love that. All right. So last question, and this you got to bear with me as I explain it for a minute. Our view is that every successful person is motivated by one of two things: the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. And it's not that anybody likes to lose. It's that you're either motivated by the idea of winning or you're motivated by any setback you've ever had overcoming it. Right. And so a good way to think about it, it's the optimistic sort of glass half full approach versus the Michael Jordan approach. Right. Whereas they almost invent things that have slights that have happened to them in order to keep them motivated to get to the next step. Devin Nunes, where do you find yourself?
I already answered that question earlier because what I do is I go to Truth Social and then I just see what Q wants me to do. And that's the position that I take. We don't make any moves at Truth Social unless Q tells us to do it.
Are you Q? I think that might be the question. You're
that's, I think, what they're saying out of the fake news sometimes.
A lot of deflection here. I'm starting to become suspicious.
Look, I never really thought about it that way. I guess I always, John Boehner used to always say something, and he was a good friend of mine. And he always say that, do the right thing for the right reasons, the right things happen. I think that's how I take things in life,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just try to do the right thing. You try to have a good time. And, that's what I've always told my team. And, all through all my time in Congress and even the kind of dark days of the Russia hoax. And of course, here at Truth Social, we have a good time. Life is too short not to have a good time. So I'm not going to of course, we take everything seriously, and you try to do the right things for the right reasons. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a nice glass of wine.
I love it. Listen, one of the easiest guys to get along with in Washington now as CEO of Truth Social. Appreciate the good work you're doing, Devin Nunes. Come back and give us an update when you guys keep building stuff.
Hey, absolutely. And it's an honor to be on, and congratulations. I know your podcast is doing very, very well. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mike.